The Veterinary Cannabis Society was founded by a group of veterinarians across the country. Really, we have an initial collaboration of about 20 or so veterinarians where we're trying to promote education, safety, and legislative change surrounding the use of medical cannabis for pets.
That's Dr. Patti Mayfield, a veterinarian in Bend, Oregon. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. So maybe you already knew that veterinarians can't prescribe cannabinoid treatments, but did you know that in most places, vets aren't even allowed to discuss it with pet owners? So today we'll hear how the Veterinary Cannabis Society is trying to change that. Plus, we'll hear about Dr. Mayfield's practice and her hemp operation in Oregon. But first, a quick sponsor break and then some hemp news nuggets. This episode is brought to you by Hemp Innovators, where summer classes are starting May 12th. Easy, affordable, and practical online classes that dig deep into the current and most relevant issues of growing hemp today. Hemp School is a 12-week online course facilitated by Steve Groff, the cover crop coach, and featuring live weekly topics and real-time Q&A. Save $50 if you sign up before May 12th. Check out hempinnovators.com for dates, times, and class descriptions. hempinnovators.com. Hello and welcome back. So last week I read in the Jacobson Hemp Daily Bulletin about a new checkoff program for hemp in the state of Montana. And no, I'm not talking about Anton Chekhov, the Russian playwright. Checkoff programs are common in other sectors of agriculture. It's where producers will voluntarily put a certain amount of money, percentage of their revenue into a pot to pay for things like research and marketing and education. Do you remember the Got Milk commercials from back in the day? Well, that was paid for by the dairy checkoff. Anyway, I wanted to learn more about this very first checkoff program for hemp in the nation, so I called up Ben Thomas from the Montana Department of Agriculture to learn more. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Yes, my name is Ben Thomas, and I am director of the Montana Department of Agriculture.
All right, well, so I've been reading about the hemp checkoff program that your state has instituted. Can you tell me sort of where that idea came from and what the goals are of the program?
Well, the idea actually came from the producers themselves. The way an assessment works is it's kind of a voluntary tax in a way. And what our producers noticed is that in other sectors, wheat and barley, pulse crops, those producers basically contribute to a fund that is used for marketing, research, and education. And as you know, with hemp, this is a very new crop. We have a lot to learn about how it grows, depending on the use, what variety of uses there are, what those market opportunities are. In order to really find that out, it takes an investment, and that's the basis of an assessment program or a checkoff program. Is to pool producer funds so that they can invest in those very important projects.
Can you give us sort of an overview of the hemp program in Montana? You know, numbers of growers, acres, varieties, that type of thing?
Well, it's developing year to year. Last year, I would say we were number one in the country in terms of acres. We have just under 300 producers last year. And this year it's going to look a little bit different. I do expect to have fewer producers and fewer acres. And that's for a variety of reasons. There definitely has been a COVID impact, but at the same time, it's very much a developing industry. Growing it is one thing, but having a market, a really developed market for it is another. And that takes, an investment in the processing capacity. And we're doing that. We have over 10 processors in the state right now, mostly focused on CBD, but we're also seeing a growth in the grain side of it as well. And we're hoping to see development of the fiber markets. But that takes time. You don't build an industry overnight.
And that checkoff program will hopefully work wonders in that direction.
I hope so. It will take some time to stand up. We still need to go through the process. The basis of the assessment was 1% of revenue. So regardless of what you sell it for, whether it's fiber, grain, or cannabinoids, it's 1% of the value of that. But exactly how that works out in this very new industry, it's going to take some time to develop.
Okay. Now, is that voluntary for the producers?
It is voluntary. All of our assessment programs are voluntary. That is to say, you can request that money back if you don't feel that those funds are being used appropriately.
Okay.
And there's accountability as well. So it's not me sitting around making decisions on how that money should be invested. It's actually a board of producers who pay into that fund who are making those decisions on how the money is best spent.
Are you hearing from other states about this? Seems like you're the leader in this type of program in the hemp industry.
I think we'll see that develop. There's definitely research being done in other states through other mechanisms. And more recently, I think we were the recipient of one federal research grant. I think the first, and so we'll see that continue as well. I know there's interest, but at the same time, no one wants to get too far out ahead and overextend. As I said, it really is a developing industry. So we want to take slow, patient, and responsible steps towards growing the industry.
That sounds very wise. All right, Ben Thomas, I appreciate your time this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric.
So hopefully later this summer, we will check back in with Ben Thomas and hear in greater detail all about the hemp program in Montana. The next news nugget is about the launch of an IPO by a company called Collective Growth Corporation, whose initial public offering launched last Friday and closed yesterday, fully funded with a market valuation of $194 million. This could be exactly what the hemp industry needs to build out the supply chain on the fiber side of hemp. I spoke with Geoff Whaling, the chairman of the National Hemp Association and one of the founders of Collective Growth. Hi, Geoff. Welcome back to the show. So what's the idea behind the Collective Growth Corporation?
Well, as you certainly have learned in your work in this space, the industry needs an infusion of capital if we are going to really start to look towards building an American supply chain and to grow from what we're doing today into a true industry. So I'm very happy that we hope, true to our word, Bruce Linton, my partner on this initiative, my former boss at Canopy Growth Corporation, and I have joined together to take on this next challenge, and Collective Growth Corporation is the result.
Okay, so it's formed as a special purpose acquisition company under the SEC rules. So what do you intend to do as a special purpose acquisition company?
So again, this is a financial instrument that has been created under SEC rules. It allows for the formation of companies that have no business targets and go out to the marketplace to say, we have experience in this area. We are looking at acquiring companies, supporting those companies, and in our case, looking at bringing those companies into America so that we can build this industry. Bruce and I spent some time initially working with Cantor Fitzgerald, who are one of the large institutional investment firms who are underwriters on this initiative. We, believe it or not, launched this in Toronto. We're having a whole bunch of marketing meetings with investors on March the 12th. And that was the same day the headlines read that the market had one of the largest downfalls and oil prices had collapsed. And we thought it was just a perfect time to go out and raise money for a plant that most people don't know about. We put that on hold for a while and started last week. We had about 40 different discussions with investment groups, and happy that before we launched the IPO on Friday at NASDAQ, that we were fully funded.
And then, so talk some more about the goal of this new endeavor.
Yeah, so one of the other criteria of a SPAC is that you cannot have any targeted companies, acquisitions. You can't have been in discussions with companies. You really are asking investors to invest in you, your track record, and your experience. Obviously, Bruce has got great success given that he's done multiple fundraisers and helped grow Canopy into the largest cannabis corporation on the planet. And certainly with the work that I've done as chair of the National Hemp Association and president of the Pennsylvania Hemp Industry Council, I think that we have a great combination where together, we can really work to start looking at all of those entities and companies that we have shared stages with in conferences in years gone by, and starting to reach out to them to see whether or not they're interested in being acquired, having investments, or being part of the Collective Growth Corporation.
Okay.
And, obviously we know that there are many regional success stories in the fiber and seed business, which is the focus of Collective Growth. We are not going to be focusing on CBD. We are laser focused on hemp as an agricultural crop, seed oil, fiber, and we really will become the conversion chain. So we will hopefully be able to bring all that technology that's necessary for decortication and secondary processing to the American landscape.
All right, I'm sure we'll hear more about Collective Growth Corporation in the future, but now on to our main interview with Patti Mayfield, a veterinarian and hemp farmer from Oregon. Patti Mayfield, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks so much for having me, Eric. Delighted to be here.
Absolutely. So you are a veterinarian out in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, and also a hemp grower?
I'm actually based in Bend, Oregon, but the farm is located in the southern Willamette Valley, indeed.
Okay. Cool. And so you are involved in something called the Veterinary Cannabis Society. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, the Veterinary Cannabis Society, we're really in the kind of beginning stages of organizing, but we've found a real need to kind of have a voice and a presence. The Cannabis Society, the Veterinary Cannabis Society, was founded by a group of veterinarians across the country. Primarily Dr. Gary Richter and Dr. Trina Haza, both based out of California. But really, we have an initial collaboration of about 20 or so veterinarians where we're trying to promote education, safety, and legislative change surrounding the use of medical cannabis for pets. We really feel that there is a lot of potential benefit for medical cannabis in pets, and potentially even expanding into, outside of companion animals. But for right now, we're focusing on companion animals. But as many legislative loopholes that there are for growers, there's just about as many for the veterinary profession as well.
Are you legally allowed to prescribe cannabis to pets?
Yeah, unfortunately, we are not, for multiple reasons. Even though the USDA did legalize hemp production, as we all know, with the Farm Bill, the FDA still recognizes cannabinoids as listed on the Controlled Substance Act. And so we are not allowed to prescribe any cannabinoid medicine whatsoever. In point of fact, there's only a handful of states within the country that allow us to even discuss or counsel on the use of cannabinoid medicine.
Wow.
So yeah, between Oregon, California, and Colorado, our specific veterinary state boards will not really pursue us with disciplinary action, but the rest of the states, veterinarians could really be facing significant disciplinary action from their veterinary state board if a complaint came forth.
Wow, that seems like, just with what I understand about cannabinoids and, the anecdotal evidence with cannabinoids and mammals and humans and all that puts you at a disadvantage, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's really where we're hoping to affect some change in that, we're really looking at, we want to provide benefit to our patients. We want to support the clients that come to us. And it's so prevalent. And, as you even mentioned, the anecdotal evidence is available for a lot of people. And there was a study that was recently published, just kind of a survey and questioning over 1,000 veterinarians. And over half of them, even closer to 75% of them, have been asked about the use of cannabinoid medicine by clients, but yet our veterinary state boards are telling us that we're not allowed to talk about it, really. And so
Whoa.
that's a frustrating component because, I want to assist the client and I want to assist my patient. And instead, many veterinarians don't feel comfortable discussing it. And so they end up turning their clients away. And their clients then invariably go to, the internet, which sometimes has reliable resources, or, a dispensary, which also a lot of tenders are very well educated on the plant, but not the specifics of species differences with cannabinoids. And specifically, dogs are not little animals in fur, or excuse me, little humans in fur coats. They're different, and they have a far different way of responding to certain cannabinoids, especially THC.
Can you talk about the way dogs react to cannabinoids?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the specific differences in veterinary medicine, primarily there is a anatomic and physiologic difference in the CB1 receptor, where in both humans and most animals, the CB1 receptor has its highest concentration in the neurologic tissue, so the central nervous system. In dogs, however, we know that the CB1 receptors are far more dense in the cerebellum, which contributes to, I guess you would say, a quote unquote sensitivity to the delta 9 THC. And, being in emergency medicine for the last 15 years, I've seen thousands of cases of dogs coming into the emergency room because of THC ingestion. Now, I've never had a patient have a fatality, but they suffer from adverse effects. And I don't want to belabor this. The language has changed quite a bit over the last 10 to 15 years. We used to call it a THC toxicity, but I think that's a great misnomer. I don't find any toxicity with THC. I just find that they have severe adverse effects. They undergo what's called static ataxia, which is kind of this swaying and listing. They kind of sway like a boat in the water. They'll have dilated pupils. They have a lot of light and sound sensitivities. They can be pretty stuporous. Some people come and say, "I think my dog's having a stroke," and then we'll evaluate the patient and look at the dog, and these are pretty classic clinical signs or symptoms. And then after further questioning, say, "Hey, is there any marijuana available in the house?" And oftentimes they'll say yes. And then you can kind of put the two and two together, and it's a pretty classic diagnosis. But these dogs do improve, but many of them are affected significantly by THC. And so it's important that any products we're looking for be really low in THC
Sure.
and heavier on other cannabinoids.
Does it affect them permanently or does it wear off?
It definitely wears off. So
Okay.
again, I don't mean to belabor in any way that, THC and cannabinoids in general are we're finding to be relatively safe, and I think we just have to be cognizant that these dogs they suffer adverse effects, but not necessarily toxicities.
Okay.
And in all the literature that I've been able to find, there's only been 2 recorded deaths of dogs secondary to THC ingestion, but that was because it was in a butter extraction that had chocolate. And the chocolate toxicosis is far worse than the THC. And in humans, there's not been any reported deaths. So again, relatively speaking, it's very safe. We just want to make sure we're not contributing to adverse effects that, the dogs and the people find unpleasant.
How about positive effects with other cannabinoids?
Yeah, we're finding a lot of really encouraging research in the same way that's on the human side of things. Both Colorado State University and Cornell College of Veterinary Medicine have done independent studies looking at the benefit of reduced inflammation associated with osteoarthritis in dogs, as well as potential benefit in reduction of anxiety conditions and in seizures. And so those are the kind of the 3 categories where most people or pet owners are, inquiring about its potential use. And, trust me, there's a lot of other potential use as well that is still in the works, looking at neuroprotective benefit, conditions like inflammatory bowel disease in cats and dogs, a condition called degenerative myelopathy. So really this, I think to understand the potential benefit of cannabinoid medicine goes to the foundation of how prominent our endocannabinoid systems are. And every single mammal has an endocannabinoid system, even going as far down the line as jellyfish. So it's something that we all possess. Excuse me, and there's far-reaching potential benefit.
Right. So what needs to happen? Is it just a legislative thing where they need to reclassify hemp, get it off the controlled substance list, or?
Yeah, I believe that's one of the great potential platforms in which the Veterinary Cannabis Society can be helpful. We are looking to join in some of the legislative movement, and currently there is a bill that has been introduced into Congress, HR 5587, and that is looking to exclude hemp products and cannabinoid products from the Controlled Substance Act. And I do believe that will be beneficial. I think it's really important to no longer, classify cannabinoids as Schedule 1, which of course indicates that there's no medicinal benefit. We do know that there's medicinal benefit. We found it. There are studies. And also, I think it's important to note that the federal government, the National Institutes of Health, holds a patent for the medicinal applications of CBD for neuroprotection.
Right.
And so I do think that movement's coming. And indeed, we want to be helpful in any way we can in getting that movement going forward. I believe once cannabinoids are either rescheduled onto a Schedule 5 or potentially removed from the Controlled Substance Act altogether, we're going to find a lot more research coming forth. We're going to find that products will hopefully also be evaluated for quality control and pharmacokinetic studies, and just making sure that we don't have any heavy metals or insecticides or fungicides that are present.
Right.
We really want safe products too, but I think legislative action is going to be our first step, and we really want to organize with every independent veterinary state board as well, and kind of discuss state by state that as veterinarians, we should have the right to discuss any potential drug or therapy with clients and patients. And so that's another action that we'd really like to see come forward.
HR 5587, it's been introduced, but it hasn't passed the House yet. Do you have any indication of sort of the timeline of this bill?
Yeah, I'm not quite certain on that. I keep checking in. I'm certain that the entire SARS-CoV-2, kind of condition right now is potentially could be delaying those efforts.
Yeah.
But at this point, I'm not really sure what timeline we're looking at. I'm hopeful that in the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to see a lot of movement on this. And really here in the States, there's movement, and also in Canada, there's a lot of campaign action going on with the Canadian Association of Veterinary Cannabinoid Medicine, for which I'm also a member. So it's really nice to see, kind of a shift in the thought. I'm hopeful that the bias and the stigma kind of set forth from 50 years of prohibition is really kind of on the downward trend.
So you have been practicing veterinary medicine for many years. Can you talk a little bit about your practice?
Yeah, so I've been practicing for 15 years, and the bulk of that has been in emergency medicine. So again, I see all the cases of THC ingestion, but in the last 3 years, I've kind of shifted more away from just a scope of emergency medicine and been incorporating more integrative medicine along the lines of traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, looking at herbal remedies and medicinal mushrooms, and kind of looking also into the realm of palliative and hospice care for geriatric patients. But I'm still very active in emergency medicine as well. I practice in 4 different emergency clinics here in the state, just kind of as an independent contractor. So it's nice to kind of keep me on my toes and kind of incorporate a holistic look as well as the emergency side of things.
Right. I've never really ever considered Chinese veterinary practices versus like Western practices, but can you talk about some of the differences between sort of those two sort of schools of thought?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty fascinating, actually. The more Chinese traditional veterinary medicine, of course, in the same way that it's applied to human medicine, really looks more at the entire animal as a body system rather than breaking it down in kind of the more Western based medicine. We're really good at isolating organ systems and trying to focus on if you come in with a cough, okay, is this a pulmonary related, like a lung issue? Whereas in more traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, you're looking at the entire animal. So you're looking at some of the points of acupuncture, as well as you're looking at herbal components and how each organ system interacts with one another. You're also looking at kind of the patient as far as what their temperament is and how that fits in with whether this is an excess disease or a deficiency type of disease. So it is kind of it's more of an entire body system rather than just specific organ, which is kind of nice to really wrap it back in.
Right. That's fascinating. What's the sort of status of the shutdown out there on the West Coast, and how is that affecting your practice?
Well, I think it's pretty much national at this point. The West Coast, we did shut down pretty early with a hotspot of SARS-CoV-2 being found in Seattle. Of course, California now is also has quite a few infections. Here in Oregon, we've been pretty fortunate, even though we did implement some of the social distancing measures pretty early on. I think our total number of infections here in the state is still under 2,000. But, life has definitely been disrupted. And, I'm very grateful that personally, my daily schedule hasn't been impacted too much. I'm still going to the emergency room. We are considered essential. Obviously, animals, just like people, don't wait to get sick or have injury. So the emergency room is still open. But we have had to implement newer protocols that can make it pretty challenging. Clients don't necessarily come into the building unless it's an extreme situation. And so it can be a little difficult to kind of have those personal relationships when someone's a little nervous about coming to the emergency room anyhow, and then they see their animal go into the building and they don't get to come with them.
That's going to be tough. Yeah.
Yeah, it can definitely lead to some additional stressors, but most people have been very understanding, and it's great to have the capabilities of telemedicine. So it's been good.
Good. So you live on a farm now? Is that true?
Yeah, so the farm is actually with my family farm, the farm in which I grew up.
Okay.
And so that's where we're growing this year. So hence the distance. I'm kind of over in Central Oregon, up in the mountains, and the farm is only a couple hours away. But it is definitely busy, and I'm there every other week, and definitely in the summer I will be spending much more time once our starts get into the ground. Obviously, it's going to be all hands on deck at that point.
So, how much are you growing? What are you growing? Why are you growing? Talk to me.
Right. Right. So all of the whys. Well, I've been an advocate for cannabis just on a personal level for a couple decades, and so with the background of ranching and farming, and my first degree was in agricultural sciences and crop and soil sciences. So it was kind of a nice shift to kind of go back to that. I've really, in the last 3 years, with kind of the focus on integrative medicine and looking more at kind of the benefits of herbal medicine, I'm just really hoping to provide a product for my friends and family and my own use that I can trust. And it's just kind of that, farm to table movement. We're growing just under 4 acres of CBG, and primarily because I think that there's a lot of potential benefit for CBG specifically, looking at neurodegenerative diseases. And so I'm growing that this year, and we'll see how the market kind of pans out as well to look at it from a financial aspect.
Yeah.
Obviously 2019 was hard on a lot of growers, and we do have kind of the CBD surplus. I think that may shift in a couple years as well. But for this year, just CBG, and we also have an apiary, so we're pretty busy with the bees as well.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between CBG and CBD?
So CBG, which most people understand, is kind of what people call the stem cell, so to speak. It's that principal precursor and kind of convergent intermediate of all of the phytocannabinoids, or all the plant-based cannabinoids. Obviously, CBG is non-psychoactive, and it is kind of a relatively weak partial agonist, for which means it stimulates both CB1 and CB2. But what's interesting is that because of its low cannabinoid receptor potency, it can actually kind of diminish the psychoactive effects of THC on the levels of CB1. So that's kind of nice because it can minimize some of that couch lock and even cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome in people.
Wait, can you say that word again?
Yeah, it's a cannabis hyperemesis syndrome that's been found in humans now. That in some people, yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. In some people, and especially we're finding in the type 1 plants, so those recreational type plants that have a higher concentration of THC than CBD, some people end up with this really significant vomiting that takes them to the emergency room.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, what's also fascinating about that is that the way that clinicians are treating it is through capsaicin and alternating hot and cold showers.
Oh, capsaicin, that's the stuff in hot peppers, right?
Exactly. And so, it kind of ties in with some of the more traditional Chinese medicine as well.
Comes full circle.
Exactly. And we know then that it's working on certain receptors called TRPV1 receptors. So, again, the more you learn about cannabinoid medicine, it's just this rabbit hole of information. It's not as simple as just, anandamide and 2-AG and the phytocannabinoids and a few receptors. There are, potentially hundreds of G protein coupled receptors, as well as ligands and other enzymes that are really quite fascinating. So it's so interesting to see.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. So how has cannabis changed the way you practice?
Well, unfortunately, it hasn't changed the way I practice that much at this time, except for when I'm, I guess I should say, in the emergency room. So I kind of have 2 scopes of practice. In the emergency room, it's a little bit more challenging to reach for cannabinoid type of products. But again, because I'm in the state of Oregon and the Veterinary Medical Board here doesn't really impose any disciplinary action, I am able to discuss and counsel and at least document with my clients that this is still considered quote unquote unorthodox treatment, but I can at least discuss it with them. And so I am able to kind of guide people down a different path to a few products that I have confidence in. And so specifically in those patients, I'm able to kind of use cannabinoid medicine as another adjunct of therapy. I still haven't just used it as a sole therapy in the emergency room, but case in point, I had a patient that came in with uncontrolled seizures. It's already on 2 different anticonvulsants. And so we started talking about adding in CBD as a potential complementary treatment. And so again, it's important to make sure that the resource that I'm sending them towards is reliable. And so I've had to do a ton of homework on which products I feel I'm comfortable supporting, and then in really maintaining a good ongoing communication with this client, because we need to start tapering off certain medications while we add in the new CBD, because all three of those medications are metabolized by the cytochrome P450 pathway in the liver. And so, there are some potential for drug interactions. And so it's changed things in that I have to become more involved on a week by week basis with a lot of my clients. And just knowing that each individual responds a little differently to cannabinoids. And we also don't have exact doses yet. So cannabis medicine doses have to be individually determined. And it really depends on the endocannabinoid tone of that patient. So it's changed things in that I'm more involved on a day-to-day basis with them.
Wow. Do you have your own pets?
Oh, of course. Of course. At this point, I'm down a few. I had some older dogs in the last 1 to 2 years that just, finally it was their time. But right now I have one little dog and one cat, and they are both they're both dynamic and exciting. And in point of fact, my small dog, he is on a CBD product right now to help with some osteoarthritis that he had associated with his knee and his hip, and as well as it might help his minor anxiety issue that he has.
Okay. What form do you give that to him in?
So I'm using a product called Ellevet, Ellevet, and it is that is a product that was actually used in a clinical trial done at Cornell, and that study evaluated the effectiveness for osteoarthritis, and they also did pharmacokinetic testing to make sure that the product would be bioavailable. And that's another significant difference in dogs, is that they typically need much higher doses of CBD in comparison to what humans are showing or mouse models, just because of the way that they process it and how bioavailable it is. So that product that I use is in a kind of like a condensed pressed cookie form. But really, PK studies are also showing that transmucosal oil is a really good method of delivering the product too.
Okay. So while you are not allowed as a veterinarian to prescribe or counsel about cannabinoids, it's still not illegal for a pet owner to give their animal this medicine, right? I mean, obviously it's out there.
Correct. It's out there. It's not illegal for them to give, but again, it's such a gray zone. Obviously, the USDA says it's legal, but the FDA says that it's in violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. And so, of course, they've doled out 15 or 20 cease and desist letters to some larger companies that were producing products last fall. And so it is a gray zone. But again, I think we just have to be patient and wait for the legislation to change. I think in the next couple years, we're going to see some things kind of even out and hopefully establish more products that have, the safety profiles that we're looking for, just the confidence. I'm sure there's a lot of products that are safe, but the labeling is inaccurate. As there have been multiple studies that have shown that really labeling is only about 30% accurate. And so, you're buying $70 worth of a product and there may only be hemp seed oil in it, which is still helpful. Hemp seed oil is a great omega-3 source, which is necessary for your own endocannabinoids to be produced. We have to have a diet healthy in omega-3s in order to produce adequate amounts of anandamide and 2-AG. But still, $70 for hemp seed oil. It's kind of outrageous.
Yeah, right. Is there any sort of aspect of upcoming research that you're really excited about? Like what else can cannabinoids do for animals?
Well, it's tricky right now because, again, so many researchers have limitations with obtaining some of the product. But I'm really looking forward to seeing more specific studies done in cats, as well as in dogs with potentially degenerative myelopathy, and again, CBG. I know Dr. Russo, who is just, he's kind of the pioneer of the majority of the research here in the States in the last 30 years. And he was involved in the project and the research getting Epidiolex approved. And that's a product used in humans for two specific seizure disorders. And so I'm really hopeful that we're going to see some more studies looking at neurodegenerative disorders. And I know CBG is being looked at for things like ALS in people.
Right.
And I think that it could have some potential for German Shepherd dogs and other large breed dogs that have degenerative myelopathy, where they start to lose the function of their spinal cord and then have severe weakness and kind of paralysis in the hind limbs. So I'm really looking forward to that. There's a lot of research looking into cannabinoids and the realm of cancer, any type of inflammatory disorder. Again, some of these inflammatory disorders that we're uncertain about the etiology, which means kind of the cause. There's even a hypothesis that there's a clinical endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. And
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, that was kind of postulated by Dr. Ethan Russo, who again is I call him the godfather of research.
So
but
what's the thinking behind that? It's like it was in our diet for so long and then suddenly it wasn't. So can you explain it a little bit?
Yeah, I think that that's one of the hypotheses is that, really the history of cannabinoid use, just culturally across the world has been prevalent until this prohibition. And so some of the thought process in clinical endocannabinoid deficiency is that deficiencies in the signaling have been implicated in some of the processes of a variety of conditions, including migraine, fibromyalgia, even in PTSD. And so there are known mutations in the endocannabinoid system genes that can contribute to some of these deficiencies as well. And so in particular, circulating levels of endocannabinoids are found to be markedly decreased in all of those disorders and potentially more.
Wow.
And so that decline in circulating endocannabinoids, the anandamide and the 2-AG that our cells make, also tends to be correlated with anxiety-like behaviors. And so there's been a wide variety of studies that have demonstrated that chronic environmental stress can reliably lead to a downregulation of your CB1 receptor, as well as reduced levels of both of your endocannabinoids, your 2-AG and your AEA,
Wow.
or your anandamide. So, the thought process there is it just that we no longer have this plant, and so we're not, consuming it, or are we not producing enough of our own endocannabinoids? And in order to produce endocannabinoids, you have to have a diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids.
Okay.
And so you look culturally, what also happened at the time of prohibition is that our, nutrition changed dramatically as well to more processed foods.
Right.
There was, of course, the low fat diet craze, which then, you're going to have more carbohydrates and, of course, sugar. So I think that, potentially the clinical endocannabinoid deficiency is probably multifactorial, but prohibition didn't do us any favors, really.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I should ask you about?
I think at this point, really, I just want to advocate for clients being, or I should say pet owners, being smart about the products that they use. I think it's important to remain hopeful and optimistic about where cannabinoid medicine is going to go. And I want to stress for pet owners to continue to try to have that conversation with their veterinarian. We do want to work with them. We do want to help guide them through it. There's just so many veterinarians that are concerned about disciplinary action. They don't want to lose their license to practice medicine. But it is important as a consumer and a pet owner to really do your homework and to not reach for a product that hasn't had some research behind it. And I know that's tricky right now, but there are so many shady characters, obviously, in the world of hemp and cannabis. But to just stay diligent in continuing to work with your veterinarian and to not give up on it. If the product doesn't work, to try to consider something else. And that's kind of one of my fears, is that a lot of pet owners are excited about this and they may reach for a product and then either suffer potentially some adverse effect, or more likely that the product just won't work or have the desired outcome that they're looking for. And so they may give up on that medicine. And so really, I think the goals of what we're trying to do with the Veterinary Cannabis Society is just make sure that we can educate everyone, have safe products available, and really kind of start working towards even veterinary cannabis practitioners, people who focus on this, because it's very complex. Like I say, the more you learn about the cannabinoid medicine, the deeper down the rabbit hole you go into enzymes, into different receptors scattered throughout the body. And I really think in the next decade, we're going to see a significant shift in how we treat patients with cannabinoids.
Dr. Patti Mayfield, thank you so much for your time today. It's great to talk to you.
Likewise, Eric, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Just a heads up that this interview was recorded on April 21st, so the coronavirus numbers that Patti mentioned are not current. They're about 2 weeks old now. Okay, well, that does it for the show today. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I know I did. I will put all the relevant links to all the relevant stuff on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. Be sure to check us out on Instagram at LFPodcastHemp. I mentioned a few weeks ago about a podcast newsletter, and you can sign up for that at lancasterfarming.com/podcast. And if you have signed up and you haven't received your newsletter yet, it's because I haven't sent the newsletter out yet. I'm still working on that. Thank you for your patience, and thanks for signing up. So feel free to write to me. You can email me anytime you want at podcast@lancasterfarming.com. My name is Eric Herlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper. I sincerely hope that you and your family are being smart and staying safe during these weirdly dark coronavirus times. We're all in this together, and only together will we get through to the other side. Thank you for listening to today's show, and until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. Episode 84 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.
Industrial hemp.